It was supposed to be the perfect celebration, our second anniversary. A quiet getaway to Blue Ridge Falls, a place that once meant everything to us. But instead of celebrating love, I found myself plunged into a raging river, fighting for my life. My husband, the man I trusted, had pushed me off a cliff, literally. And while I thought the worst was over the moment I hit the cold water, that's when the real battle began. James thought I'd disappear without a trace. But he was wrong. I wasn't done yet. I was still alive, still breathing, and I wasn't about to let him get away with the life he'd planned to bury me in. The revenge I had carefully plotted was one he never saw coming, and it would tear apart everything he thought he had under control. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about reclaiming what I lost, making him face the consequences of his actions, and rewriting the story of our marriage. The river didn't drown me. It only awakened the fury I'd kept hidden for so long. The first year of marriage is supposed to be the honeymoon phase, right? A time filled with warmth, love, and the promise of forever. But somewhere along the way, I had noticed the small shifts, the ones I tried to ignore, the ones I convinced myself didn't mean anything. After all, who would want to face the truth when everything looks perfect on the surface? James had changed. At first, it was subtle, a glance that lasted a second too long, an unspoken distance between us that felt more like a chasm than a crack. He used to make me laugh with his offbeat humor, surprise me with little thoughtful gestures, and whisper sweet words before bed. But those moments had been replaced by silence, by the coldness in his eyes, and the heavy tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud. It was like he had put up a wall, brick by brick, and I was too blind to see it until it was too late. I remember trying to bring it up once, a few months ago, when it felt like the distance was growing too obvious to ignore. "James, what's going on?" I had asked, my voice shaky with a mix of fear and concern. But instead of the reassurance I needed, he just gave me that look, the one where his face hardened, his eyes darkened, and he turned away, as if my question was an inconvenience. He shrugged it off. "I'm just tired, Chloe. You're overthinking everything." But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I wasn't crazy. It wasn't just the late nights at work or the quick, curt responses to my attempts at conversation. It was the way he stopped making an effort altogether. The silence that followed my every question, the way he'd barely look at me anymore. Even when we did talk, it felt like he wasn't really there. Like his mind had wandered far away, and I was just a ghost passing through his life. I kept telling myself it would pass. People go through rough patches, right? It would get better. I just had to be patient, understanding, supportive. I kept pouring my love into a void, convinced that one day, it would finally come back to me. But every day, the gap between us grew wider, and the love I thought we had seemed to evaporate like smoke in the wind. When the invitation came for our second anniversary trip, I was desperate for a change. Maybe this trip, a return to Blue Ridge Falls, would help us reconnect. That place had once been magical. Our first camping trip, when we had laughed under the stars and shared our dreams. I thought maybe, just maybe, it could fix us. James said it would be a healing trip. He promised it would help us find our way back to each other. The words sounded so perfect, so full of hope. But something in the way he said it didn't sit right with me. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I tried to brush it off, tell myself I was overthinking again. After all, it was our anniversary. The day we should celebrate everything we had built together. But the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. As we drove toward Blue Ridge Falls, I kept trying to start a conversation. Anything to break the silence that had settled in the car. I asked about his day, mentioned something funny I had seen earlier, but he only responded in short, one-word answers. His eyes stayed on the road, his jaw clenched, and I could feel the tension building, thick as a fog. The radio played country music, something we had always shared a love for, but this time, neither of us sang along. It felt as if we were strangers sitting next to each other, pretending to be something we were not. The further we drove, the heavier the air became. The closer we got to the falls, the more my unease grew. James's body language was off, his posture rigid, his eyes never meeting mine. He wasn't even pretending to care. When we finally arrived, he barely glanced at me as he parked the car under a large oak tree. "Let's go," he said, his tone flat, almost mechanical. It was as though we weren't standing in front of the place where we'd first fallen in love. A place that had once held memories of laughter and warmth, of feeling like we could conquer the world together. Now, it just felt cold. We hiked along the trail toward the waterfall, the steps heavy beneath my feet. The trees towered over us, casting long shadows that seemed to mirror the growing distance between us. I tried to make small talk, but James barely responded. The silence was deafening. My thoughts raced. What was going on? Why did it feel like we were miles apart, even though we were standing side by side? When we finally reached the waterfall, the sound of the rushing water was deafening. I stood on the familiar stone ledge, staring at the beauty of the falls, trying to hold on to the memory of how it used to feel here. I could still remember the way James's hand felt in mine that first trip, the way he had looked at me with such tenderness in his eyes. But now, I only saw emptiness. I stepped closer to the edge, feeling the wind whip through my hair, and whispered, "We used to sit here. Do you remember?" James didn't respond right away. His eyes stayed fixed on the waterfall, as though he couldn't look at me. Finally, he spoke, but his voice was low, distant. "Chloe, have you ever wondered if things would have been different if it hadn't all started here?" His words hung in the air, like a warning. A question I didn't know how to answer. I turned to face him, confusion clouding my mind. "What do you mean?" The breeze cut his shirt, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I saw something flicker in his eyes. It wasn't the warmth I once knew. No, this was something colder, something empty. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said, his voice monotone, as if reciting something rehearsed. "About life. About choices. About being trapped." My chest tightened. "James, what's going on?" I asked, my voice trembling now, the dread pooling deep in my stomach. His eyes finally met mine, but there was no tenderness, no affection. Just a hollow, unreadable look. "I didn't bring you here to fix anything," he said, each word cold and deliberate. "I came here to end it." Before I could even process his words, it happened. James stepped toward me, his hand on my shoulder, not in comfort, but with a push that was forceful and deliberate. I felt myself lose balance, the world tilting in an instant. The roar of the waterfall became deafening as I fell backward, my scream lost in the deafening rush of water. Everything happened so fast. But in that moment, as I plunged toward the cold, unforgiving water, I realized I wasn't just falling into a river. I was falling into the dark truth of everything I had been ignoring, everything I had overlooked. The man I thought I knew, the man I thought I loved, had never been the person I thought he was. And now, it was time to face it. The world tilted in a way that felt like a nightmare. For a split second, I was weightless, suspended in midair, as the reality of what had just happened hit me like a freight train. James hadn't just pushed me out of anger or frustration. It wasn't an accident. No, this was something much darker, much more deliberate. This had been his plan all along. His words echoed in my mind, cold and emotionless, "I came here to end it." And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't just facing a man I once loved. I was facing the end of everything I had known, everything I had trusted. The push wasn't the breaking point, it was the culmination of months of emotional neglect, betrayal, and the realization that the man I married had been planning my disappearance from the very start. As I fell toward the raging river, my body crashing against the jagged rocks beneath, panic gripped me. The freezing water engulfed me, swallowing me whole, as the roar of the waterfall deafened my screams. The shock of the cold sent a jolt through my entire body. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The water surged over me, dragging me further downstream, leaving me disoriented and vulnerable. For a moment, all I could feel was the crushing weight of the water, the relentless force pulling me under. I fought desperately to break free, my arms flailing, my legs kicking, but it was no use. The rocks below were too slippery, too unforgiving. I couldn't find my footing. But then, through the suffocating panic, a faint voice echoed in my mind, a voice I hadn't heard in years, but one that had been with me through every storm I faced. It was my mother's voice, calm and steady, like it had always been. Don't fight the water, Chloe. Let it carry you. Let it take you where you need to go. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stop struggling, to surrender to the current. I couldn't let panic control me. Not now. I had to survive. I had to live. The seconds felt like hours, the river tugging at my body, pulling me further away from the edge. I focused on my breath, trying to steady my heart, trying to hear her words over the roar of the waterfall. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. I stopped fighting the water. I let it carry me. Time seemed to blur as the current moved me downstream. The icy grip of the river was harsh, but it also gave me something to hold on to. And then, I saw it, a branch, just within reach, floating on the surface. I reached for it with everything I had left in me, my arms aching from the struggle, my legs numb from the cold. With one final push, I grabbed hold of the branch, using it as leverage to pull myself toward the riverbank. My fingers, raw and shaking, clutched the moss-covered branch as I dragged myself toward the edge. Each movement felt like an eternity, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had to survive. I had to make it out of this. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of fighting the river, I found myself on the riverbank. My body was battered, my clothes torn, my skin scraped raw from the jagged rocks, but I was alive. I was breathing. I collapsed on the damp, mossy ground, gasping for air, my heart still racing. The coldness of the water had seeped into every part of me, but it couldn't break my will. I wasn't dead. And that meant I still had a chance. For a moment, I lay there, my body trembling from the shock, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. James thought he had ended me. He thought he had gotten away with it. But he was wrong. I wasn't finished. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Slowly, I pushed myself up onto shaky legs, my hands bleeding from the rough rocks I had gripped onto during my desperate fight for survival. Every step felt like it took all the strength I had left, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I had come this far, and I wouldn't let James win. Not like this. I limped along the creekside, my body screaming in pain, but I kept going. The woods around me were quiet, eerily still. There was no sign of James, no sign that he had even noticed I had survived. But I knew. I knew that the second he realized I was still alive, everything would change. I was going to make him face the truth. I was going to make him pay for what he had done. And in that moment, as I stumbled through the thick woods, I made a vow to myself, James had no idea what he had just started. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The air was thick with tension as I limped through the woods, my legs heavy with exhaustion, my body battered and bruised from the fall. Every step felt like it took more strength than I had left to give, but I pushed forward. I was alive. And that meant everything had changed. When I finally emerged from the woods, I found a dirt road and stumbled onto it, waving down a passing car. An old pickup truck screeched to a halt. A man in his 50s, wearing a plaid shirt and ball cap, rolled down the window. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. I need to make a call," I gasped, my throat raw from screaming and gasping for air. "Please, can you take me somewhere?" Without hesitation, he opened the passenger door and helped me in. The truck's engine roared to life, and as we drove away, I could feel the weight of the world starting to lift, just a little bit. The man, who introduced himself as Bill, took me to a small diner on the outskirts of town. The place was a hole in the wall, but it had warmth, comfort, and most importantly, privacy. Bill gave me a wool cardigan to keep warm and a cup of hot cocoa, his silent understanding offering a small amount of peace in the midst of the chaos. I could barely think straight, but my mind had already shifted into survival mode. I needed to make James believe I was dead. It was the only way to keep myself safe, to turn the tables on him. The time for playing nice was over. I borrowed Bill's phone and called the only person I could trust, Grace, my best friend since college. When she picked up, I could hear the panic in her voice, but I barely had time to explain. "Chloe? Oh my God, what's wrong with you? Where are you?" she asked, her words rushed. "I'm at Pine Grove Deli," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "Please, don't tell anyone. Just come get me." Grace didn't ask questions. She just told me she was on her way and to keep the line open. That was all I needed. I wasn't alone. Not anymore. The next few days passed in a blur of frantic action. I hid in a remote cabin, far from the town, where the world could believe I had disappeared. Grace helped me set up a false narrative, spreading the word that I had drowned after slipping into the river at Blue Ridge Falls. It was the perfect cover. No one would suspect a thing. And for now, that had to be enough. While I was safe, I couldn't rest. I couldn't just sit back and let James get away with it. I had to make him pay for what he did. So, I went to work. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't just a victim. Using my artistic background, I began to document everything. I took photos of the bruises on my wrists, the cuts on my knees from the rocks, and the deep marks on my shoulders from where I had clawed at the earth to escape the water's grip. I took pictures of my battered hands, the blood still fresh in places where my skin had torn from the roughness of the branches I had gripped in my struggle. But it wasn't just physical evidence I was collecting. I began saving the texts James had sent me over the past months, those subtle threats and dismissive messages that had slipped under the radar at the time but now made my skin crawl. I spent hours poring over old conversations, recording my memories of every argument, every hurtful word he'd ever said, and every time he had let me down. I recorded my thoughts, too, in a private journal I kept hidden, a place where I could speak the truth without fear of anyone else hearing it. The weight of it all felt heavy, but it was necessary. Each photograph, each message, each memory I captured was another step closer to exposing him for what he really was. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He had taken everything from me, my safety, my trust, my love, but he wasn't going to take my dignity. I wasn't some passive victim waiting to be rescued. I was going to fight. And this time, I would fight smart. Every day, I felt myself growing stronger. The fear of what had happened began to fade into the background as the fire of determination burned brighter. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was a woman with a plan. James thought I was gone. He thought he had silenced me for good. But he had no idea what was coming. It had been 3 weeks since I escaped the river, since I made the decision to fight back. Every day had been a calculated move, a step toward reclaiming my life. Grace, my best friend and the only person I trusted with my secrets, had been my rock through all of this. Together, we had set a trap for James, one that would bring everything to light and ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. The time had come to set the wheels in motion. We began by sending James anonymous letters that contained cryptic messages designed to rattle him, to make him question everything. At first, it was small things, a blurry photo of a woman at a bus stop who vaguely resembled me, a note that read, "Chloe's not under the waterfall like you think." It was a harmless start, just enough to make him pause and wonder. But then we escalated the game. Grace and I worked tirelessly, fabricating fake witness reports that hinted I was still alive. We made sure the details were just plausible enough, an eyewitness who claimed to have seen me on the outskirts of Asheville, a letter claiming to know where I was hiding. The perfect web of doubt. James was paranoid, but he had no idea what was really happening. The tension built within him as he watched his world unravel, every piece of evidence sending him spiraling further into fear. He began to unravel, making mistakes, letting his mask slip more and more. And with each step, I was one step closer to exposing the truth. It wasn't just about making him nervous anymore. It was about breaking him, just like he had tried to break me. I knew he would reach out for help. And that's when we made our final move, a meeting. Grace had set it up with a retired investigator, a man named Harvey, who had become our secret weapon. Harvey was now playing a dangerous game, posing as someone who had seen me long after I was supposed to be gone. The message was clear: James was losing control. And I was still alive. The day of the trial came too fast, but I had prepared for this moment, and now, everything would fall into place. I was no longer the woman who had been pushed into a river and left for dead. I wasn't the terrified wife who cowered in the shadows, hiding from the man I had once loved. No, I was a woman with a purpose, a woman who had fought for her life and was ready to fight for justice. Grace, my unwavering ally, sat beside me, her presence grounding me. Elijah, the lawyer who had become my lifeline, was already inside, working with the prosecution to make sure we had everything we needed to bring James to justice. As the courtroom doors opened, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I didn't let the nerves take over. This was my moment. I was about to confront James, to show the world who he truly was. And for once, I didn't fear him. James walked into the courtroom, his face a mask of arrogance, his posture stiff as if he was still trying to maintain control. He didn't look at me as he passed by, but I saw the brief flicker of fear in his eyes. He was trying to play the part of the grieving husband, the man who had lost his wife. But the truth was about to tear that mask to shreds. I sat quietly as the prosecutor laid out the case, the fabricated story of my disappearance, the lies he'd told, the chilling details of his calculated actions. Every witness we had gathered, every shred of evidence we had collected, pointed directly to him. And the one thing James never expected was my voice. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up and faced him. I could see the sweat beading on his forehead, the nervous twitch in his fingers. I didn't need to say anything at first. I just looked at him, into his eyes, the man who had pushed me off that cliff, the man who had thought he had buried me. I began with the truth. I told the court everything, how we met, how I fell in love with him, how everything changed when we got married. I spoke of the abuse, the emotional neglect, the silence that had consumed our marriage, and how it all led to the fateful day at Blue Ridge Falls. I didn't need to scream, to cry. I just let the facts speak for themselves. When I spoke of the push, of the cold calculation in his eyes as he stood behind me, I saw his face drain of color. The mask had slipped. The man who had tried to silence me, who thought he could get away with murder, was finally exposed. I didn't stop there. I presented the evidence, photographs of my injuries, text messages, the recordings, the witness statements. Each piece of evidence was a dagger, driving the truth deeper into the heart of the lies he'd built. And then, in the final moments of his testimony, James cracked. The pressure of the truth, the weight of his lies, overwhelmed him. He broke down, his voice shaky, his hands trembling as he admitted it all. I didn't mean to kill her, he said, slamming his fist onto the table in a desperate attempt to regain some control. I just wanted her out of my life. I never thought it would go this far. But it had gone that far. And now, it was over. The jury didn't hesitate. The judge didn't waste time. James was sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted murder, psychological abuse, and conspiracy to end my life. I sat in the courtroom, my heart still racing, but this time, it was with relief. The weight that had crushed me for so long was finally lifted. James wasn't going to hurt anyone else. Not anymore. As the gavel struck, I realized something I hadn't been able to admit before. This wasn't just justice. It was my freedom. I had faced the monster I once loved and came out on the other side stronger. And that's a victory no one could take away from me. A year had passed since the trial, since the day James was sentenced, and everything in my life had finally started to shift into place. I had rebuilt myself from the ashes of a marriage that had tried to consume me, and though the scars would always remain, they no longer held me back. I was stronger now, more than I ever thought I could be. The day I walked into the courtroom, I had felt like a prisoner of my past, burdened by the weight of everything I'd endured. But today, I was free. I had proven to myself that I could survive, that I could live beyond the shadows of abuse, and that I could let go of the anger and pain that had defined so much of my life. It was time to return to Blue Ridge Falls, but this time, I wasn't coming for revenge. I wasn't coming to relive the horror of what happened. I was coming for something far more important, for healing, for closure, and for forgiveness. I drove up the winding road, the familiar twists and turns that led to the falls. As the car rolled to a stop under the large oak tree where it all began, I felt the weight of the past lifting from my shoulders. I was no longer that woman who had been pushed into the river, struggling to survive. I wasn't that terrified wife who feared for her life. I had faced my fears, I had fought my demons, and now, I stood here as someone who had reclaimed her life, her voice, and her truth. I stood at the edge of the waterfall, the same place where James had stood beside me a year ago, his hands cold and steady as he pushed me into the depths below. I could still hear the deafening roar of the water, but now, it wasn't the sound of my life being stolen, it was the sound of a new beginning. In my pocket, I felt the weight of the small velvet box. I held it in my trembling hand, feeling the cold metal inside. My wedding ring. The symbol of a life I had tried to build with someone who didn't love me the way I deserved. I had held onto this ring for far too long, unable to let go of the woman I had once been, the woman who had trusted him, the woman who had believed in love. But today, I was no longer that person. With the sun beginning to set behind me, casting a golden glow over the water, I opened the velvet box and stared at the ring. It had once been a symbol of love, of commitment, of hope. But now, it was a reminder of everything I had fought to escape. "I'm letting you go," I whispered, the words barely audible over the roar of the waterfall. And then, with a final, steady breath, I let the ring slip from my fingers and fall into the river. It disappeared into the water, disappearing from my life forever. And as it sank into the depths, I felt the last of the weight that had clung to me vanish. The river took it all, the pain, the betrayal, the fears, and I was free. As I stood there, my heart lighter than it had been in years, I heard the soft crunch of footsteps behind me. I turned to see Grace, my best friend, walking toward me, her eyes filled with understanding and strength. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She simply walked over to me, wrapping her arms around me in a tight hug, offering her quiet support. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. One by one, other survivors began to emerge from the shadows. Women I had never met but whose stories resonated deeply with my own. They came forward, each one carrying their own pain, their own past, but also carrying a sense of strength that could no longer be hidden, strength that was no longer ashamed. One woman, Jenna, stepped forward, her eyes red from crying but her chin lifted in defiance. She had been through the worst, but today, she was standing tall, just like me. Another woman, Marie, who had fled her abuser with nothing but the clothes on her back, placed a broken necklace on the ground near me. The necklace had been a gift from her abuser, a token of control and manipulation. She, too, was letting go. One by one, they all stepped forward, each woman shedding the heavy burdens they had carried for far too long, reclaiming their lives, their freedom. They were no longer victims. They were survivors. And in that moment, standing on the banks of Blue Ridge Falls, I understood that our strength was not just in surviving, it was in standing together, in lifting each other up, in rewriting our stories and creating new, powerful chapters. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a soft, golden light, we sat together, sharing bread and hot tea. We didn't speak about the men who had hurt us. We didn't need to. Instead, we spoke about the future, the dreams we were now chasing, the lives we were now building. We spoke about the new path we were walking, one that was filled with hope, with healing, and with the knowledge that none of us were alone. When the time came to leave, I looked back at the waterfall one last time. The water was still, as if it had never swallowed anyone whole. It was a peaceful silence now. And in that silence, I found my peace. A year had passed since that day at Blue Ridge Falls. The road to recovery hadn't been easy, but it had been mine to walk. Every day, I felt stronger, more at peace with myself, and more committed to the journey ahead. I had rebuilt my life, not just for me, but for every woman who had been silenced by fear, by shame, by trauma. Now, I stood at the front of a room, looking out at a group of women who were in the same place I once was, afraid, uncertain, but ready to start over. The weight of their stories was palpable in the room, yet I knew what they didn't. There was hope. There was light at the end of the tunnel, even if they couldn't see it yet. I had created New Haven Path with one simple mission, to offer a safe space for survivors of abuse, a place where their voices could be heard, and where they could find the support they needed to heal. It had started as a blog, just my story, but it had grown into something far bigger. Now, New Haven Path was a thriving community, an organization offering everything from counseling and legal aid to workshops on self-esteem and empowerment. I wasn't just the founder. I was a survivor, a voice for those who couldn't yet speak. Every survivor I helped, every story I listened to, reminded me of why I started this journey in the first place. I was no longer just living for myself. I was living for all of us. Today, I was meeting with a new group of women. They had been through the unimaginable, just like I had. They sat in front of me, unsure and fragile, each one looking for a lifeline. As I stood there, I saw the same fear in their eyes that I had once felt. But I also saw something else, something that hadn't been there before, a spark of hope. It was faint, but it was there. And that was all I needed to see. "You're not alone," I said to them, my voice steady, calm, but filled with the strength I had worked so hard to find. "I know what you're feeling. I know how it feels to think you can't go on. But trust me, you can. I'm standing here today because I didn't give up. And you won't, either." I paused, letting my words settle in the room. I didn't need to say more. They understood. They had already started their journey, and I was here to walk beside them. The work we did at New Haven Path was more than just therapy or support groups. It was about rebuilding lives from the ground up. It was about giving women the tools to find their voice, to reclaim their power, and to start fresh. It was about showing them that what had been done to them didn't define who they were or who they could become. As I left the room that afternoon, my heart was full. I looked out the window of the office, my eyes tracing the skyline of Asheville, the city that had once felt like a prison and was now my sanctuary. I had built something that mattered, something that would last. New Haven Path wasn't just about helping women survive, it was about helping them thrive. And I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. I had once been that woman on the edge of the waterfall, fighting to survive. But now, I was standing tall, stronger than I ever thought I could be. And as long as there were women who needed a safe place, a voice, someone to say, "I see you, and I believe in you," I would keep fighting. For myself. For them. For every woman who had ever felt like she didn't have a way out.